everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to Kitchen Table Meta. Today is the first ever Meta Monday, which is a series I'll be doing every Monday now, where I'll take a topic, a community topic, and I'll kind of go over it and give you guys my opinion and what I think. Now, this topic can be anything from card choices to decks that are doing well to rules, or in this case, it'll be what's best of one or best of three, and how that kind of works with our game. Now, what I want to do with this this series, I want you guys to tell me what you want. So in the comments below, please give me some ideas, some suggestions, some things you want me to talk about and discuss, and I'll pick one each week. I'll put your comment up on the screen and then we'll go over it. All right, so let's get right into the video. Now, like I said, this week will be the difference between best of one and best of three. I see this happening a lot in the groups and see people talking about it. I get a lot of questions about it, and it's something I really want to talk about because our game is young. It's just starting, it's developing, and this is the perfect time to kind of, let's talk about it, see which one we think is best for our game, and the kind of the pros and cons to each one. Now, I want to preface this with saying that it doesn't matter to me which ones get chosen. I don't care either way. Either way, I'm going to play this game. It literally does not matter to me. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a best fit for us. And I do have an idea of what I think the best format for our events could be. And so moving on, I want to go over essentially 4 things at the start that are things that are myths. I want to bust some myths that I see a lot in this topic. And number one is there is no standard. I hear this a lot. People keep saying, if you don't do best of 3, that's the standard. That's what everyone does. And then other people say, no, best of 1 is the standard. That's what everyone does. Okay, so there is no standard. And I'll give you guys a couple examples. Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh!, they both use best of 3 formats, while Star Wars Destiny and Versus, 2 other popular card games, use best of 1. Those are 4 completely different games. They use, different systems. Next up, we have the Pokemon TCG. Everyone's played it. Everyone knows what it is. And they use a combo. For their lower events, they'll do best of 1s. And then for their higher events, they'll do best of 3s. So they do both. And then finally, we have games like Netrunner, which is another really popular Fantasy Flight game, and they have a completely different system. First game, one person plays as the runner, the other person plays as the corp, and then they switch off for the second game, and then whoever has the most points wins. And you take another popular game like Hearthstone, and their tournaments are completely different as well. They'll do things like, their main tournament structure is, you pick 3 heroes you bring with you, and then the first person to lose a game with all 3 of their heroes loses that round or whatever. And so those are all, completely popular games. They're all extremely popular, and they work well. Like no one's complaining about their tournament structures, and none of them do it the same, right? There's no standard. There's no right way to do it. You do it ever how the game or how your player base really kind of feels. Whatever has the best flow is the most important thing. Moving on, tournament structure has nothing to do with skill. I see this all the time, and it has everything to do with variance. And so when you're talking about these different tournament structures, usually how they're determined is by the variance of the game. Okay, so you take another popular example, Magic. Okay, this is something we probably all play, we all are familiar with in some way. And this game, the tournament structure is because the reason why they do best of 3, the main reason, has nothing to do about skill. All right, it's not like the best players in the world are like, I need best of 3 because I'm awesome. No, it has nothing to do with that. It's because the variance in that game is tremendous. There's a huge gap of variance between the land drops, between literally half of your deck is unplayable cards. The mulligan system is terrible, and so what I mean by that is, once you mulligan a Magic, you go from 7 cards to 6. And if you mulligan again, you lose a card. So every time you mulligan, you lose a card. And then on top of that, matchups are terrible because the color pies are so specific. Sometimes a certain color combination will have problems against other colors. And so all of these factors and many more contribute to why it's a best of 3. It has nothing to do with skill. And again, everything to do with variance. And that's something very important to realize when you're talking about these different formats. Third thing is that just because you play slow does not mean you're bad. And actually, in the contrary, usually the slower players are the better players. Now, I have played games competitively for almost my entire life. And, this is a discussion maybe for a different day. But essentially what I'm trying to say is I always play slow. I always take my time. I think through my turns. I think about what my opponent can have. Before I make a play, I'll double think. I'll triple think and make sure that this play I'm making my opponent won't have something I'm not thinking about and blow me out, right? I don't want to play out this awesome 4-drop and tap out and then get my creature countered or get it crusher balled or something and then lose the whole game, right? And so I really want to think about all my turns, think about everything. And that doesn't mean I'm a bad player. Doesn't mean I'm not, smart enough to count up combos in my hand, which those sometimes is the case. It's because I'm thinking. I'm always preparing for the next turn and the turn after that. Now, it's not to say that if you play quickly, you're bad either. It's just saying that the speed of which you play does not determine how good you are and should not determine which form is better. If the majority of players can't get through a best of 3 before the time ends, it's not because everyone who's playing it's bad. It's just because maybe your game takes a lot of skill, it takes a lot of thinking, and the best of 3 may not be the best format for that type of game. And then the last thing I want to talk about is, and this is very important, guys, this is maybe the most important thing I can say in this video. If this is the only thing you take away from this video, please grab hold of this. And that is, no matter which structure becomes the standard for our game, please support that structure, right? It's okay to like the other one better. It's okay to, like a completely different way better. Maybe you like to play a completely different way, but please support the game. I have seen too many comments. I have seen too many things that people have said, well, if it's best of 3, I'm not playing. Or if it's best of 1, I'll never play. Please don't say that, guys. Our game is young, it's growing. Our main goal should always be to strengthen the community. And no matter what the tournament is, you should always support our game, because if you don't, that's how the game dies. It's whenever you have this huge divide and people are too proud to just suck it up and plan something they might not like 100%. Keep giving feedback to Bandai. Keep letting them know what you guys want, but don't be bummed out if you're not playing the type of tournament. I've played them both. I've played in best of 3s and best of 1. I do prefer one more than the other, but I'm going to play no matter what because I love the game. And that's the attitude you should have too if you truly care about the game. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the one that I think is probably most people's favorite system, or I wouldn't say favorite, I would say it's one they're most familiar with, is best of 3. Now, the thing about best of 3 is, first of all, I think because it's familiar is why it's so popular. I think people, they don't like new things, and when they see that like people are wanting to do best of 1 or maybe doing some other kind of crazy format, they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean? Best of 3 is what everyone does. But again, best of 3 is at its best when it's paired with high variance games. Again, we'll say Magic is the perfect example with the mulligans, the matchups, the lands. It makes it a good fit because, a lot of times in Magic, especially, there's certain times where you don't even get to play the game. You sit down, you draw your cards, you don't get a land, you mulligan down to like 4 cards in hand, you get 1 land in hand, you play it, and then you're screwed. You don't ever draw another land, and your opponent's just sitting there destroying you, right? That's not fun, right? That happens. Pokemon's another good example. Sometimes you don't get, your basic Pokemon in hand, you have to keep mulligan, and then when you do get a basic Pokemon, it's one of your supporting Pokemons. It's one of your Pokemons that whenever you play it out, something good happens for you, but you don't get that effect when you start with it, and so that really hurts your matchup. And so that's another game where best of 3s are pretty good, right? Another thing that best of 3s do is they allow for sideboarding, which is considered a skillful part of the game. We'll get into that a little bit later, but it's something that format allows to happen. It opens that up. And then the last thing is, best of 3 has absolutely nothing with skill, guys. There's no person that's playing a best of 3 is saying like this is the King's format. This is all for skill. Nothing like that at all. All it's there to do is to help trim out variance. That is literally it. And so a good way to see this is that like football games, right? Football games, basketball games, they don't play best of 3s, right? They don't run out in the field and play football, and then after they're done, they're like, all right, let's play game number 2. Like, no. There are some playoffs and stuff, especially in baseball, like the World Series, where they'll play multiple games. But it's not at all like that, right? Their regular season play is universally best of 1, and that's because the variance that's in those games, which there is tons of variance, by the way, in sports games, just isn't enough to make up for when I have to play a whole new game. Most of the time, the best team wins. And in most of these games, you'll see that most of the time, the best player wins. And so let's hit the pros and cons of this real quick. So the pros of best of 3 are that it helps high variance games show a winner, right? It allows for the games to have a lot of variance to kind of determine the winner, even over some sort of kind of weird situations that might occur. Second of all, sideboarding is possible. Because you have best of 3, you have sideboarding. Now, this can be a pro and a con. I'll talk a little bit about sideboarding here. The problem a lot with sideboarding is that it helps even up the matchups, right? And so if you're playing, let's say, a Frieza deck, and you struggle against a Vegeta deck, right? You can't beat a Vegeta deck. And so you sideboard in all this stuff, and now you can beat Vegeta decks very consistently, okay? Well, if that's the case, then best of 3s will help Vegeta decks. Will help Frieza decks. The problem, though, is that this can lead to imbalance. This can lead to a clear best deck, because a lot of times what happens is that a deck that is really, really good will have a couple bad matchups, and that will kind of stop that deck from being very good. Now, the problem is that whenever they can sideboard into making that matchup very good, then all of a sudden that deck becomes the clear winner because it can't be beaten, right? It can lose game one, but then it can sideboard into something good, especially with Dragon Ball. Since you're drawing so many cards, it's very easy to get your sideboard cards that we have to be very careful with this format, especially with sideboarding, because it can take a deck that's very good, and then with good sideboardings, especially when set 2 comes out, set 3 comes out, we have better sideboarding options, it can lead to imbalances. So that's one thing to remember about sideboarding. It can be a pro, and it can also be a very deadly con. So be very careful with that. Now let's move on to the cons with best of 3. It can cause longer rounds, which leads to events like people dropping, like super long events, right? It can lead to, if you play a 10-round event, or even like something like reasonable, like a 7-round event, and you have to play a best of 3 every one of those, plus a top cut, it's very easy to get to people just being like, ugh, I don't want to do this. You know, especially if they lose like the first 2 rounds, or just like, I'm out, I'm dropping. And then that leads to really weird matchups, and sometimes people make it in top 8 that shouldn't. And the best of 3 format, you know, can literally lead to just long, grinding matchups. The second thing is it can lead to draws, which is super unfun. Nobody wants to play draws. Whenever I played, in my one best of 3 format, we did have a draw, and it was against a fantastic player. He was awesome. We had amazing 2 games. He won the first game, I won the second game, and we had to draw, and that really stunk, right? Because I really wanted to play that third game, right? And I keep getting it. It's like, well, if you would have played best of 1, you would have lost. And it's like, yeah, that's okay. I mean, I deserve to lose, right? I mean, I lost due to a play mistake, so it's okay with me. I don't care to lose. Like, if I lose, I always learn something from it, and that's something that I want to run home here, guys. Just because you lose a game, it doesn't mean it's luck, right? And we'll get to that when we get to the other thing, but essentially, almost every time you lose, it's due to a play mistake, guys. I hate to burst the bubble, but it is. It's almost always due to that. And if you start learning and finding that problem you make, then that will make you a better player instead of just blaming the variance, because it rarely is the variance. And so, like, and even at the Gen Con tournament, the same thing happens to me. I played against a guy round 3. I made a huge play mistake. I actually ended up losing the game. If we would have had a best of 3, there's no way I would have lost that matchup. I mean, he had no cards in hand the entire game. But I made one play mistake, I lost, and if it, you know, and I don't care. It's like that, because I lost that game, I've learned something, right? I will never make that play mistake again. So, you know, the games leading to draws is terrible, and I would much rather just lose than get a draw. The second thing is the most recent Pokemon regional also was in Connecticut. It was in Hartford, Connecticut, and 2 of the best players in the world made top 8 with a 9-0-5 record. That means they won 9, they lost 0, and they drew 5 times. I mean, that's unbelievable. And sure, that might be like, you know, showing you guys like maybe the format's really stally, maybe it's a really like slow control, you know, matchups, and that's why that happened. But regardless, 5 draws in an event is unacceptable, and it's just unfun to play, guys. It's super unfun to play, and that's a huge downside with best of 3s. Okay, so I'm sorry I kind of rambled a little bit about that, but it's just really important. I want you guys to really understand that, like, drawing and some of these things that are considered pros can easily be cons with the best of 3. Okay, moving on. Let's go to best of 1. Okay, so best of 1 is best when it's paired with a low variance game. And so we use our game, for example, Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball is an awesome game to be used with best of 1 because you draw, you know, at least 2 cards a turn when you're awakened. Sometimes you draw 3 cards a turn. You're getting cards off of other cards you play. You're getting cards off of your life whenever you get hit. You're just drawing so many cards, and all that card draw really kind of lowers the variance down. Second of all, anything could be land. Anything in your hand could be energy. And because of this, again, it just really reduces the variance of the game. And last, there's no color restrictions with your leaders. So if you really want to play Vegeta, you don't have to play blue. You can play, you know, red, yellow Vegeta if you want. And this is really important because of that, and there's no really color restrictions, it opens the game up, right? It's hard to have a bad matchup because you compare any color with your leader, right? If you're playing Vegeta and you're having a bad matchup against yellow, oftentimes you can just tweak your colors in your deck, and then all of a sudden now you'll have a better matchup against them, and that's good. Also, another thing to remember about best of 1, I hear this all the time. Oh, best of 1 stinks because if I get unlucky and lose, then, you know, my opponent cheesed me and they got the win. That's not the fact. Again, we talked about it before, but literally when you lose a game, 95% of your time, it's your fault. You do not lose as often as you think based on luck. You could go back and look at your games, and you'll find that it's a play you made turn 2 that made you lose on turn 5. If you really analyze your game and you really think about it, and sometimes it's even more obvious. Sometimes you just tapped out and played a big threat out, and your opponent comboed out and killed you. That happens often. And so I hate seeing this argument that every time I lose, it's because of best of 1. If I would have played a best of 3, I would have won. It's like, No, that's not true. That's not true at all. It's just play better, play tighter, play closer, and make sure that. And the thing I love about best of ones is that when you lose a game, it's more impactful, right? You're like, crap, I lost, and you really start focusing on the game. You really start seeing where the mistakes you made, and those best of one games can really make you a better player quicker. And so let's move on to the pros and cons of this. The pros of it is that we have quicker Swiss rounds. And this is really important because the way our current game is structured is so that most players, when they just show up for the event, they get a pack, a promo pack. Now, a lot of stores have been making it so you have to stay the entire round. And that's really a good way to make people stay and make the tournament fun. Now, if you don't have that kind of incentive to keep people around, people dropping early can really hurt your event. And that's why best of ones are really good, because it allows you to have quicker Swiss rounds. Second of all, you can take more time thinking at your turns, right? Like I said before, I like to think, I like to make sure I'm making the optimal play. And while that speed comes with time, even then it's still really good to really second guess yourself and even triple check and make sure the ideas you have. And playing one, 35-minute best of one round, it can really turn into like a chess-like battle between you and your opponent, where you're thinking and you're trying to make the most optimal play. And I love that. I think that's a really fun format. Now, some of the cons to best of one: there's no sideboarding. There's no potential to sideboard here. One thing that it can fix this is to do what I call pre-boarding, and that's where we would have some sort of format where I show you my leader, you show me your leader, and then we can pre-board, and then we play our game. So you sideboard before the game starts. I like this. I think it might be something neat to play around with, but the problem is because leaders aren't color specific. I can show you Vegeta, and that could be 3 different decks, and so that might lead to it might make it a lot more harder to sideboard, which is kind of neat. But again, that's some way to fix that. It's not the best fit. Also, a lot of people feel like that, and cons is for this is a lot of people feel like if they lose early, they're out of the tournament, right? Oh, I lost my first round of best of one. There's no way I can make it to the top cut now, because there'll be like 2 or 3 undefeateds, or maybe 1 undefeated and 1 like X1. That's true, and that can feel like that. In some events, depending on how it's run, that can happen. However, the best way to fix this is what one of my friends told me, which was using Swiss plus rounds. And what that means is if you would normally do a 5-round event, you would do 6 or 7 rounds instead, and that will fix the variance of having like a bad matchup or losing an early round. And so that kind of fixes that weird kind of like, oh, I had one bad matchup, I lost, now I can't make top cut. And I love that idea. I think it's really cool. And so instead of playing 5 quick rounds, you're playing 7 quick rounds and just quickly getting through it. Okay, so last thing, and this is how I feel like the event should work and how the tournament structure for Dragon Ball should work. And that is, I think it should be best of 1 Swiss into best of 3 top cut. And so what that means is we'll start out with best of 1, you do Swiss, and we can even do Swiss plus here. So you do, like, let's say in a 5-round Swiss, we would do 7 instead, or 6 instead, to make up for the variances and matchups and maybe a little bit of bad luck. And then after that, you pick your top 8 players or top 12, however how you want to do it, and you do best of 3 matches with sideboarding. And that allows you to kind of have the skill involved with sideboarding and that kind of ability in the game, while still letting tournaments quickly go through for most of the players. Because, like I said, don't kid yourself. Tournaments are literally for the more competitive players. However, what I always say is, you have 75% of players that are there just to play and have a good time. You have 24% of players that want to think they're competitive and think that they're really good at the game, and they just want to, play and crush noobs, and they get mad whenever, they get a bad matchup. They blame everything on that, and they're always going to complain no matter what. And you have 1% of the people that are players like me who are players who love to play the game at a high level and don't care how the format is. And so, 76% of the players who show up for events, no matter how you have the event, they're going to be happy. And so this is something to really remember with this format. No matter how you do the format, most of your players are probably going to be happy because A, they get to play the game, and B, they get to play at a high level. The other 24% of people, you can't make them happy no matter what anyway. So, that's something to kind of remember as a tournament organizer going into this. And so again, the best of 1 and the best of 3 fixes most of the issues with our last 2 formats. It just kind of combines them, takes all the good from one and leaves out all the bad. Now, the pros and cons with this format is, the pros is we still get the quick Swiss rounds, which is awesome. It's good for new players. They don't feel like they have to invest an entire day there, right? They don't have to be like, well, I'm in this 7-round tournament. Looks like I won't be here the entire day. It's like, no, they can jump in, play 6 hours and maybe 4 hours and be done. 4 to 6 hours, depending on how big. Second of all, you can take more time thinking out your turns. You can sit down, play a very strategic, a very dynamic first round, and then be done. Last thing is you still have sideboarding in the main. So like in the big top 8 finish, you still have sideboarding. You still have the option to build those sideboards and kind of correct your matchups, which is fun for people who like that format and like that challenge. That's still there for them. Now the con for this will be losing early can lead to maybe not making the top cut. So, and that stinks, right? If you get a bad matchup the first round, maybe a bad matchup the round 2, it can really feel like you can't make it into the top 8 if you lose. However, the Swiss Plus solution we had will fix that by making it, you have 2 more rounds to kind of make up for those 2 losses. All right, guys, so that's it for my breakdown. Again, I think best of 1 Swiss into best of 3 is for sure the best way to do our tournaments for the foreseeable future. If I had to pick one, best of 1, best of 3, I would absolutely pick best of 1. I know our one best of 3 tournament we went to, we drove 5 hours up to the event. We had to play a best of 3. It was like 5-round best of 3. We didn't get home until like 3 in the morning. It was exhausting, but I still had a great time. And like I said, no matter how these events are set up, I'm going to love it. I'm going to like it. I'm going to play in it. And I'm just want to kind of give you guys my thought and kind of a look at some of the pros and cons of all 3 forms that we can do it, and let you guys decide. Let me know what you guys think is the best. Also, guys, let me know what topic you want me to do next week on Meta Monday. And thank you guys all so much again for all the support last week. We grew to almost 100 subscribers and had tons of comments, tons of likes, all in just 1 week. So thank you guys so much for all the kind words, all the support. And I will absolutely see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to do my first top 5 video. I'll be doing the top 5 leaders for set 1, and I'm excited to get that out and excited for you guys to see that. That's probably going to be like another weekly thing where I'll choose one topic and do top 5 about it. And that's it, guys. Thank you again so much for watching, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks, guys.